I'd like to call to order this December 8th, 2022 school committee meeting, and we'll take a roll call vote.
Tim Knight here.
Jessica Riley here.
Michelle Kirkby here.
Leo Brem here.
Anna Mayo Shaybrook here. Great. So at this time, we will take public input, and citizens at this time may address the committee on items of school business not on the agenda. The committee will take such items under advisement without action at the meeting during which the item is presented. Matters pertaining to the reputation, character, physical condition, mental health of individuals will not be permitted. And members of the public will also be welcome to comment during the public input through Zoom. Please raise your Zoom hand. We ask that you keep your camera on when making a Zoom comment and that you follow school committee policy for public input, including speaking for no more than 3 minutes and only on topics under the purview of the school committee. So at this time, do we have any public input?
Chris Potts, 7 Kirk Street. Hope everyone's doing okay tonight. I just wanted to, I put together a list of suggested agenda topics for future meetings. I thought I would just share them tonight. I will start with school committee goals for the coming year to help guide the budget, a school committee self-evaluation, MCAS results. This will be the second year that we have not had a presentation or discussion on MCAS results. Closing education gaps among marginalized student populations. We're usually pretty late with a presentation on Metro West Adolescent Health Survey results. At this point, many districts have already had that conversation and discussion about their results. We have yet to have the School Wellness Advisory Committee report that includes goals and objectives for the new year. Again, we're now at least 2 years, if not longer, without any kind of report. These are all topics that many school committees have already discussed or have in the pipeline, yet we have yet to see them on any agenda. So I would just request that school committee take these up for future agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other folks for public comment? Any online or on Zoom?
No.
Okay. Great. All right, at this point, we will have the approval of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the executive session of November 17th, 2022, regular session of November 7th, 2022, and November 17th, 2022, and our workshop on November 15th, 2022?
So moved.
So moved. Jess Riley, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Michelle Kirkby, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you.
Are we going to retain the executive session minutes as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
We will, thank you. And we should vote on that. May I have a motion to approve to retain the November 17th, 2022 meetings?
So moved.
So moved, Leo, second.
Second Tim Knight.
Second tonight, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you for the reminder, Jess. At this point, we have high school advisory. Who's going up first? Oh, Marilyn. Super. And welcome. I hear you're standing in. Thanks,
Thank you.
Marilyn.
Yeah, so I am the class president of the senior class, and I'm filling in for Gabby Curl, who is the rep to school committee. Just some updates given the anti-Semitic graffiti at our school this week. I think that administration and staff did a great job turning that into more of like a way for students to bounce back and learn from the event. They gave us lots of resources, lots of open discussion, so I thought that was great. Secondly, the seniors just wrapped up our winter dance, and that went phenomenally. Ticket sales were great, so yeah, that's really all we have going on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, my name is Tess Baki. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the last meeting, but I'm the rep to school committee for the class of 2026. This year, for my class, it was all about getting used to the high school and getting off to a good start. This November, we had a Yeti fundraiser for prom our junior year, and we raised $525. We made it through the first term of the high school, and the transition went very smooth from the middle school to the high school. It was a lot different from the middle school. We have letter grades rather than standards-based reporting from the middle school, and the workload was a lot harder. Initially, many students worried over this change, and it did take a lot of getting used to, but I think we got used to it pretty well. We utilized Flex very well, and it has helped us in so many ways. And it helps us for homework and studying for tests, and we did really like it. Also, the fact that we have a 5-day rotation, it helps us so much, and we get a lot of homework done in those 5-day rotations, and it's a lot easier. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Callahan. I'm the president of the class of 2025. Our rep to school committee, Sophie Shield, couldn't be here tonight, so I'm here. So for our first fundraiser, we are doing dog leashes, and we ordered those a couple days ago, and manufacturing has begun. So we're going to start advertising and sending out order forms, hopefully within the next week. So we're really excited about those. We also are looking into doing a shoe drive through an organization called Fun to Orgs, which basically gives you a check in return for shoes, and it's a nonprofit organization. And last year we had a coat drive that went really successfully, so we know that a lot of people in Medfield can donate, and especially after holidays and getting new shoes, that would be a great thing to just get some community service, but also raise money for our grade. We are also hoping to do holiday cards for the people at Thomas Upham House. We did that last year, and it was a great turnout. We got like twice as many cards as we needed. We just did it during an advisory one day, and our grade made cards, and they were really beautiful. And I know the people at Thomas Upham House really appreciated it, so we definitely want to do that again. And we're also still brainstorming more fundraisers for the spring, but we send out a lot of surveys to our grade because their input and feedback is important to us. And I think the feedback we got the most from students is just about the Wi-Fi. A lot of students just said that they're having trouble getting Wi-Fi, and it's pretty inconsistent in the school depending on the day and where you're in school. And they said it's a problem because if they don't get their classwork done because of the Wi-Fi, that doubles their homework when they get home. So that was just the main feedback we got. But yeah.
Good feedback. Oh. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Hello, I'm Ava. I'm the treasurer for the class of 2024, and Catherine is usually here. She couldn't be here tonight, so I'm filling in. So recently we just finished our winter wreath fundraiser, and it was a huge success. We sold out all the wreaths. We also did a phone wallet fundraiser this fall, which is still occurring, and we still have plenty left if anyone wants to purchase one. The year is going well so far. We haven't heard many concerns on behalf of students. As Marilyn mentioned, there was an issue with anti-Semitism recently, and I know as students it was horrifying to hear, but I do think the administration did well, and our advisory discussion, I thought that it did well because it showed this person that they were outnumbered in our community, and we don't stand for that. At this point in the year, most kids have figured out time management and organization, and students are definitely staying busy. The next big thing for our class that we are looking forward to is prom, and we are starting to gather some ideas. And
That's great. Thank you, Ava.
Thank you, Ava.
Super. Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have a question? Any questions for the students? All right.
No.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, always.
Happy holidays. Yeah, you're free.
Free.
Thank you.
Fly.
You're welcome
Fly.
to stay.
All right, wonderful. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a very special guest from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, Mr. Jim Hardy. Hello.
Hello.
And you made it here despite the traffic. Super. So we've invited Mr. Hardy here. It was actually just Riley's idea last year to bring in Mr. Hardy to really go over the roles and responsibility for school committee. Not so much, well, each of us has taken the training sponsored by the MASC called Charting the Course. And so this was really more so for the community to get a better understanding of the role of school committee. And what I asked specifically when I spoke to Mr. Hardy is really to also hone in on the difference between school committee and the Board of Selectmen and how those meetings are run and the expectation, etc. So thank you for coming to Medfield.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
Let me get my share screen up here. Oops. There it is. Oh. I'm gonna leave the microphone off on my laptop so I don't get double. Sure. Yeah.
You'll do well here.
You've done this a couple times, I see.
I'm always prepared the old-fashioned way.
Nice.
Pass it down.
Thank you.
We're getting there.
Oh, yay.
There's enough people in the audience. Should they want them?
Someone can, if someone from the audience would like one, you're welcome to. Okay.
So good evening. Thank you for inviting me out here tonight to talk with you folks. For those who don't know me, my name is Jim Hardy. I'm the Field Director for Training and Development at the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Been in that position since February of 1996. So that's almost 27 years. The presentation I'm going to give you tonight is not the standard roles and responsibilities because of the request. It's tailored a little bit. But what I do plan on covering during this 30-minute presentation and then Q&A is the big picture for school committees, mainly what currently are your primary responsibilities. And as you can see on the screen, one of the things that we always talk about is for the local school district, you are the legislative authority for the schools. You are the ones that establish a budget, you establish policy. We'll talk about policy again in a second. You set goals and objectives. You are the force. You are the what you want to do and why you want to do it. Group of people for the school districts. You go to town meeting with a budget proposal, they approve the bottom line, but only you control where within that budget that money's spent. And you do that through your budget allocations and your budget deliberations. Second part is appraisal. When you set goals and objectives, things get measured. Standards get met or not, but you decide what tools you're going to use to determine whether a goal was established or not. That's the appraisal component. The old saying is things that get talked about get measured. Well, things that get measured get talked about as well. And that's the part that is up to you to do, whether it be establishing district goals for the school district or goals for yourselves. Also determining what does success look like? What does it look like? What's the end result that we're looking for? You determine a district improvement plan based off of the school improvement plans that come from the schools. And part of that is allocating the financial resources to achieve the goals. It's great to have a goal, but if you don't fund it or provide the backing for it, it's never going to get there. So part of that is allocating resources to do that. Public relations, big component. It's all about telling your story. If you were to look at an entire school year, September to June, and say, what at the end of this, what story do we want to tell about our school district? Well, then every single meeting becomes a chapter in the story, and further promoting what it is, what is the message you're trying to get across. If you've established a specific goal for the end of the year, you should be talking about it at every meeting and determining, where we are, status, roadblocks, what are some of the things we need to change, what are some of the obstacles we need to overcome, who do we need to involve in the process, all of that stuff. But part of that public relations is also telling your story. The worst thing that a district or the community can tell you is that you only come to us when you need money. You never talk to us the rest of the time. Well, that's a message in itself, meaning the community wants to hear from you more, and having students make presentations at your meetings is one step to do that. But the other dynamic is you have to realize is that on average across the Commonwealth, only 20% of the households in a community have school-age children, which means there are only 20% of your households paying attention to your school-based communication, whether it be your website, whether it be emails or text messages or everything else that you send out. You're only reaching about 20% of your community, your households in the district. Find out what the rest of where do the rest of the community lie in that demographic. Boomers write things down. I mean, they write cards, they write letters, they write so forth. It's write me, phone me, email me, text me. Those are the four basic generations that you have now in your community. If you have any left of the greater generation, it's all about face-to-face contact with them. So you have to go see them. So again, we're talking about public relations, having a plan so that you get out to the entire community. Educational planning and evaluation is really kind of ties back to goal setting, but it's a little bit more. It's more in the vision, mission component, strategic planning component. It's one thing to have a mission, but is the mission action? I mean, does it take what you're trying to get done and put it into action? So a vision statement might be something like, what do we want our students to be able to demonstrate proficiency in when they walk across the stage or walk across the field and pick up a Medfield High School diploma? What does proficiency look like? What is the portrait of a graduate? You probably heard that term floating around. What does that look like for you? And then your mission statement is taking that thought and putting it into action. The people that have gone through training with me, you may have heard this before, but it kind of bears repeating. Probably one of the most concise and pointed mission statements I've ever come across is nothing more than 3 words. Eat the cat. EATTHECAT. Eat the cat. Any idea where it came from?
Caterpillar. The Caterpillar tractors.
Very close. It's related to that. It was the mission statement of International Harvester, whose major competition for farming equipment was Caterpillar. So everything they did as a board of directors was, how does this help us beat them? All right? The problem was they weren't paying attention to number 3, John Deere. Kind of jumped over them. So you can't be so focused that you forget all the other surroundings around you. And then the last part is personnel. You are the hiring authority for the superintendent of schools. You are the evaluator for the superintendent of schools. So making sure that is done in a professional, respectful manner is also important. But to kind of go back to what was initially said about how is your position different than some of the other positions in town, we need to kind of go back back in time, back to 1980, when the Proposition 2.5 passed. Why did we bring Proposition 2.5 up? Well, what was life like as a school committee member prior to Proposition 2.5? Well, there's no one at this table who was a school committee member then. Anybody in the audience know what it was like to be a school committee member in 1979, 1977? You'll love it. You had your own tax rate. If you go back and look at tax bills from before then, there was a school tax rate, which meaning you set a budget, it went to town meeting. If town meeting didn't approve it, you went and gathered 5 signatures, and it overrode town meeting vote, and your budget was implemented. And then they created a tax rate to figure out what it was going to cost to fund that. Not bad, right? No more battling a town meeting with all the other departments over funding. You just simply submitted a budget, and the 5 of you could sign it to override whatever town meeting voted. Life was grand, except it got abused, and it prompted the Proposition 2.5, which not only limits 2.5% of annual growth on the valuation of property within the community, it caps that at 2.5% of the total evaluation. And after 40 years of Proposition 2.5, we have some communities that are reaching their cap, meaning what they currently raise in taxes is approaching 2.5% of the total evaluation of their community, which means once you hit that cap, there's no more automatic 2.5% increase. Never mind having to do debt exclusions or Prop 2.5 overrides. So there's 2 pieces of that. Now, what did this do to schools? Well, a lot of schools had to eliminate a lot of what we call not secondary positions, but the assistant positions, meaning assistant principals, assistant superintendents, the feeder groups into the administration ranks. A lot of those were eliminated. Those positions were simply eliminated. Now, many of those people went to other states to go to work because everyone across the Commonwealth was cutting out assistant superintendents and assistant principals and so forth. So there was that, we felt that effect later in the 90s when superintendents started to retire in mass and there was no feeder system to fill them. So it became very quickly a challenge to fill vacancies. So Proposition 2.5, you now have to live under a 2.5% cap like every other department in your municipality. You had to go to town meeting and fight for your dollars. But it wasn't all that bad because we had the Massachusetts miracle of the 80s. Well, the miracle of Massachusetts, or whatever phrase you want to run. In fact, Governor Dukakis ran for president on the platform that he was the creator of the miracle of Massachusetts. We all know how that turned out for him, maybe. But the state was getting flush with money. We had the 128 build out with all the tech companies. Personal wealth was at an all-time high. Taxes were actually being cut. The state was so flush with money. Massachusetts miracle. So the state was beginning to fill the gap where the municipality, where you lost money from the municipality, the state started to fill that gap and funneling more money to the school district. The downside of that is you became dependent on that money. Then the recession of the 1990s hit, right? So this was predominantly prompted by the oil crunch when Iraq decided to invade Kuwait and oil prices skyrocketed and the economy tanked. It was also coupled by the end of the Cold War, so there was less Defense Department spending, which impacted Massachusetts, but not as much as the Northeast as it did the rest of the country. The Northeast actually responded a little bit faster. So these are economic factors that are going on. So you became dependent on the state for that money coming up through the 80s to fill the gap that Prop 2.5 left you. Now that state money was drying up because the economy was crashing. Now there was a huge crunch. And in the background during all this, there were 2 lawsuits being filed. One was back in 1978. It was McDuffie. It was a student in Brockton, Jamie McDuffie, versus the Secretary of the Executive Office of Education. And then there was a second lawsuit filed in 1989, Levy and others versus the governor, and it had everything to do with equity. Equity in education, equity in how the state was allocating its money for education. And the basic premise was that the quality of your education was solely dependent on what your zip code was. Meaning, wealthier communities could afford to step in and fill the gap left by the state during the recession, while poorer communities couldn't afford to do that. And the state had no real mechanism for balancing that out. And they just basically funneled money to everybody as much as they could. But there was no balanced system to that. These cases eventually ended up in the Massachusetts Superior Court, where it was ultimately decided that because of the language in the Massachusetts Constitution safeguarding education for all schools and grammar schools in the Commonwealth, and it was the state's responsibility to do so, the Superior Court ruled that the state was failing to ensure that every student had an opportunity for a quality education, which led to the birth of the Education Reform Act of 1993 and the birth of the foundation budget formula, which everybody understands, right? Now, what does the Act to Reform Public Education have to do with any of this? Well, the state decided since we have to pump in more money to the schools, we're going to make some changes. We're going to, dramatically shift how things are operated. We want site-based management. They were in love with the Kentucky model of site-based management, meaning principals were in charge of their buildings. And they were responsible for everything that went on in that building. Well, in Massachusetts, principals, prior to 1993, were part of the teachers' union. They were a unit of the teachers' union. So principals, assistant principals weren't true administrators. They were, responsible to the teachers' union just like teachers were. The only true administrator in the district prior to 1993 was the superintendent of schools. But superintendent couldn't hire anybody because the school committee had all hiring authority prior to 1993, meaning custodians, secretaries, everybody came to you for approval. So that's another dramatic change that happened. But to move to the site-based management model, one, they created site-based councils, which you might call them school improvement councils or parent, whatever the group is that works on the budget and works on the handbook. The other thing they did was they took principals out of the unions and they gave assistant principals the option. They can go out of the union or they could be in the union, but they maintain that option. They moved all the hiring authority down, meaning for building level administrators, it was the principal's responsibility with secondary approval by the superintendent, and for district-wide positions, it's the superintendent of schools, period. School committee hired superintendent, assistant superintendent, sped director, business manager, and a couple other small ones. And it was mostly school physicians, school nurses, because those sections of statute were not affected by the Education Reform Act, although everyone agrees they should be hired the same way as every other person. The nurses would go through the same process as a teacher would, and the school physician would be appointed by the school committee on the recommendation of the superintendent. So, there is no act to reform boards of selectmen. There is no act to reform boards of health. So while all of the school committees were affected by these changes, meaning you lost hiring authority, you lost evaluating authority other than the superintendent of schools, you don't evaluate anybody else anymore since 1993. And your oversight was basically reduced to setting policies, setting budgets, setting goals for the district, and setting mission, vision, strategic planning. Truly a board of directors versus more active in the district. So back then, prior to 1993, if a parent had a problem with the teacher, you could go directly to the teacher because you hired them, you appointed them. So they worked directly for you. Superintendent was kind of lost in all that shuffle. After 1993, couldn't do that anymore because they know you weren't actively involved in their hiring. That became building-based. And that's the backbone of the Education Reform Act, is site-based management. Everything comes from the building now. So now if a parent has an issue with you, with a teacher per se, and they come to you, you have an obligation to send them, have you talk to the teacher. You have to kind of send them back into the system. If it's a problem with a bus driver, same thing, go talk to the bus driver. You don't call the transportation company, or you don't call the director of transportation. So that's the significant difference. And probably the position that was most impacted was principals. They lost the ability or the protection of being in the union as a principal. They became independent contractors, meaning they had their own profession, they had their own contract, and there was no protection from there because if they're not doing a good job, they can simply be not renewed. And no cause. In fact, it's suggested you don't give a cause, you just don't renew the contract. But the other impact here was parents and guardians. They now, through the advent of site councils, came more involved. They were more active in the schools in an official capacity. Rather than simply a volunteer, parents, guardians were now involved on site-based councils and involved in some of the decision-making and kind of like the long-term planning of the school through the discussions on budget, discussions on handbook changes and things of that nature. So while all the things that were taken away from me from this position of school committee were filtered back down, they weren't done away with, they were simply assigned to other people through the Education Reform Act. And that's the best way I can describe the differences between a school committee and a board of selectmen. I served on both. When my boss introduces me for the orientation training, he talks about how I served on a school committee for 9 years, and then I went to the dock side and became a member of the board of selectmen. People laugh, they think it's funny, but yeah, I did it. And I can tell you there is a significant difference in the responsibilities between the two, simply because of the authority those positions have over everyday kind of activities, from where the speed traps get set up to what the dog catchers do, what the animal control officer's doing about the barking dog over on Highland Street, to everything else. And you don't have that. So you are less involved in the kind of day-to-day operational stuff than a board of selectmen is, or a board of health, or any other municipal board, simply because of this act of 1993. This really shifted to more of an oversight position rather than an actively involved position. But having good oversight and having good plans going forward sets the tone for everything. If you think of the two most important factors, what you want to do and why you want to do it, they all rest with you. Who, when, how, that's the administration side of the equation. But you set the tone. You set what you want to do and why you want to do it. So it's a very powerful thing that you do have. And when we talk about research, there's a lot of different research out there. There's the Ohio Lighthouse Project. There's the effective governance model that was done through Harvard University. And all of those different research models talk about what are some of the things and what are some of the attributes of what they term effective school committees. And these are some of what they have a clearly articulated vision. They hold themselves and everybody accountable for decisions. They hold them accountable for goals being established and so forth. They develop relationships, not only amongst themselves as a collegial group, but also with other municipal boards and different stakeholder groups within the community. They use data in their decision making. They look for concrete evidence, data, and they stay away from the emotional components of having to make a decision. They focus on collaboration, trying to develop consensus, but ultimately realizing that sometimes we have to make a decision and it might be a divided decision. I remind people all the time, the Supreme Court makes laws for the land on 5-4 votes all the time. Still a law. It still passes. And by doing all that, they build trust. When a committee can deliberate and argue a point or argue an issue, but they do it in a respectful, civil manner, that's the behavior you would love to have your students exercise in your schools. That they can get into a class and debate 2 opposite points of an issue. And at the end, they go, "Hey, nice job," shake your hand, and they're friends again. I always equated to my 2 younger brothers and I was 4 years older than they were. They're twins. They'd always gang up on me, but I'd always be able to kind of knock them back down because I was way bigger than they were. But at the end of the whole row, we were best buds again. And I could pick on them and they could pick on me, but no one else could pick on them. But, building that trust and the ability to have debate, but have it respectful and civil, demonstrates it to the community. The civility that you demonstrate builds trust with your community. They see a functioning, diverse group of people being able to debate an issue without getting into the shouting matches and so forth. And that builds respect amongst yourselves. It builds, when you trust your colleagues and you know that if you say something, it's not going to get kind of like shoved back down at you. That builds respect as well amongst yourselves. And again, when people are looking at Zoom or sitting in the audience looking at you and they see a committee willing to debate an issue, but to do it with respect and civility, it builds trust out in the community as well. They see a highly functioning board. They don't see Tuesday night fights, or the must-see TV kind of component where it turns into a shouting match and people are throwing things. If you really want to see what I'm talking about, go on YouTube and Google outrageous school board meetings, and you'll kind of see some examples
No thanks.
of what you don't want to see. The other thing when we talk about effective school committee meetings is that it's student achievement focused. Your agendas are driven by things that you want to talk about that affect student achievement levels. Goals are aligned, goals are monitored. If someone's acting up, you self-govern yourselves. And you evaluate yourselves on a regular basis as to how are we doing with the goals we set for ourselves as a committee. And the other component is that professional development is a key component. Attending trainings, whether it be the free ones that are on the first Friday of every month at noontime, or some of the other ones that are available to you. Or even just simply going to a division meeting and talking to some of your peers and some of your colleagues. Being able to share experiences, and maybe you might be able to offer some advice to someone who's going through something that you guys have already dealt with and moved on from. Just being able to kind of share that experience. Simple graph is school committee's governance, superintendent's management. The other means, meaning mission, vision, goals, policy, budget. That's how you get things. That's setting the standard. The methods are how things are developed, strategies, action plans, procedures, regulations developed. That's all on the administrative side. What, why, how much. You control the budget, so what you want to do, why you want to do it, how much is it going to cost. Who, how, when, where, all of that's on the administrative side. You are the bridge between the community and the superintendent. And the superintendent's the bridge between you and the staff. You authorize, vote something, and then you monitor it. Superintendent recommends something and then implements the plan. And together you discuss or you talk about the evaluation of that. As a committee member or as a committee, that's when you're empowered. When you're sitting together at a properly posted meeting with a quorum present is really the only time you have any authority whatsoever as a school committee member. Your authority comes from being on a board. being on a committee, not as you as you are not 5 individuals, you are one of 5 that has the authority. As an individual, after a meeting, you have no inherent authority. You can't spend money on your own. You can't make commitments for the committee that you haven't talked about already. You govern through policy as collectively as a group. You can, as an individual, you can certainly ask critical questions or participate in the debate. But ultimately, once the committee makes a decision, it's the old saying, what's next? Committee voted, it's 3-2, 4-1, whatever the case might be, okay, moved on, the committee has spoken. Part of this is also maintaining a relationship with the superintendent. When the superintendent trusts the committee, you actually find out more things because the superintendent's not afraid that something's going to get leaked out into the public. And the same is true. When you trust the superintendent, you'll find that your relationship works a lot better. You are the employer of record for the purposes of collective bargaining. So you are responsible for all the collective bargaining with all the school employees. And, making sure that that process is done, bargaining in good faith. Make sure that you follow the rules. We already talked about the legislative position for the schools. You set goals for the school district. You're the only group that can set policies. Other people can suggest things, but ultimately you're the ones that have to approve that. We are talking about why set goals. I think the biggest one here is that if you don't, other people will do it for you. If you don't have a direction for the school district, other people will attempt to set it for you and send you in a direction maybe you don't want to go. So that's real important that you are the ones who are driving the bus. You are the ones that are setting goals for the district. You are the ones that have established the mission statement for the school district. By setting goals, it allows people to track things. You have something to measure. You can track progress, track obstacles, or any roadblocks that you might have in your way. And it also lets the community and the staff know which direction you're going. I currently live in Situate. I'm moving to Plymouth, both near water, so I always use a lot of sailing analogies. So basically, for a sailor without a destination, there's no such thing as a favorable wind. If you don't know where you're going, any course will get you there. But you want to make sure, part of your responsibility is ensuring that all the components of the Medfield School District are rowing the boat in the same direction. One school's not going that way, one school's not going that way, one school's not going that way. Everyone's coming together and heading down the same road. That's the only way you're going to make progress. Again, we talk about alignment. Everything's the foundation of the pyramid's based off of the district plan, district goals, strategic plan, if you have one of those. Everything comes off of that. From the district, from that foundation, you start building upon your own goals or maybe the superintendent's goals. From there, it goes to the administrator's goals. From there, it goes to the teacher's goals. And ultimately, it goes to the delivery of instruction to students. Now, if this was an hourglass, you could flip the whole hourglass over and wrap it in assessment. Meaning, did the instruction we want to be delivered to students actually get there? Did the students absorb it? What was the roadblock? What were some of the problems? Did the teachers meet their goals? Did the superintendent meet their goals? Did the district goals get met? Did the school committee meet their goals? You turn that hourglass around, you start all over again. It's like, okay, so we fell short on this one. What do we want to do to make it up? Or what do we want to do to build on it? Or we blew that one away. Did we set it too low? How can we build upon the success that we've had? And that's an important component because it's a circle. Everything starts. You go around the circle and you come back again, and everything starts in the middle. Overarching goals for the district, and there every piece gets attached to it. But ultimately, it's accountability, monitoring progress, assigning budget support, but then making sure they're all aligned is the most important aspect of that. Policy, one of my favorite things. So only you can establish policy for the district. currently, I am working with the policy subcommittee to help update or bring up to date, I should say, the Medfield school committee policy and bring it in alignment with your current student handbooks and collective bargaining agreements, as well as recent state changes from state agencies that cause things to be changed. It's not by no means, shape, or form is it in terrible shape, but I've been doing this for 27 years. I've done over 100 school districts updating their policy manual. For all the manuals you see online, that's my program, hosting them online. So, I think it's important that making sure you have an up-to-date, user-friendly policy manual makes it a lot easier for people to ensure that they're staying the course and following the road or following the path you've set for them. I can guarantee you that if your manual is online and somebody clicks the link, they're all seeing the exact same version of that policy. I could not guarantee that when you were just following hard copies. That one may or may not have gotten the update from the last vote you took. And usually the administrative assistant for the superintendent had to recall policies every year and make sure that they were all up to date. And that's something that will happen again. And we talk about what policy is. Clear statements that set forth the purposes and prescribes in general terms the organizational programs of the school district. It's a very simple definition. All policies are adopted by the school committee. School committee establishes policies. The administrative team develops procedures to implement that policy. In most cases, those procedures do not have to come back from you as long as they are in line with the policy. There are some exceptions to the rule, and it's basically because some state agencies have said the district will have a policy, and the policy will contain all these elements. And many of these elements are procedures. So we kind of split the document up into two pieces, and you'll see some of those when they come before you after we start working with the policy subcommittee. But policy is not only in your manual. It's not the only place. Your collective bargaining agreements contain personnel policy. Your student handbooks contain codes of conduct. Strategic plans contain a lot of directional type policy, goals and so forth. Minutes, a lot of times you might make a motion and take action on something, and you've actually established a policy for something. Or you've amended a policy for something and no one ever thought to go back and check the written policy to see what that said. Many grant applications, particularly those that race to the top, and the initial school resource officer grants were policy documents, and they actually contain fiduciary responsibilities as well. Regional agreements, town charters, and probably one of the bigger policy documents other than your policy manual and handbooks is your budget. That's where you make decisions around class sizes, programming, grade configuration. A lot of that stuff is built into your budget document. Again, we talk about what procedure is, policy is what, procedure is how. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but it's real important that what you want to do, why you want to do it, has to be clearly articulated. However, even in the best case scenarios, there are times when the lines blur, and we're not quite sure. Well, there's no court case, so there's no legal precedent to determine it, and the Education Reform Act was silent on it. A real good example of that is student handbooks. One law says that the superintendent shall publish handbooks for the district. There's another law that says school committee will approve codes of conduct for the district. And then depending on which agency you speak to, whether it be the Superintendent's Association, Principals Association, or us, might have three different legal opinions of who really is responsible for voting changes to the handbook. Ours is it's the school committee because they contain codes of conduct and policy statements. But until someone goes to court on it, there won't be a definitive position on that. That's why it's real important to talk about it. When there is no definitive response to or definitive legal case to rest your case on, it's real important that you have a conversation before the circumstance occurs, so that you've talked it out and this is how we're going to proceed. So there's no confusion at the end of that. We talked about the personnel. You hire the superintendent. Superintendent's responsible for managing the system in a fashion consistent with state law and policy determinations that are made by the school committee. Some other positions that we talked about also, you hire with no recommendation from anybody, though you're not required to have a recommendation from anybody, and you contract with the superintendent, you hire and retain legal counsel, and then you advise and consent on these other positions here. It's basically the superintendent makes a recommendation and you either accept or not accept that recommendation, but you cannot substitute somebody in lieu of that recommendation. And you are the employer of record for collective bargaining. Superintendent, again, we talked about roles, responsibilities. It's hired by the school committee as a chief executive, chief educational, chief operating, whichever word you want to put in there, for the school district. He's responsible for the management of the schools, authority over personnel, supervises principals, implements the policy, initiates budget proposals, and manages the approved budget. So basically saying, budget comes before you, bunch of discussions, public hearings, so forth. You approve a number, it goes to the town meeting. Town meeting approves a bottom line for you. That's all they can do. They cannot change any of the line items within your budget. Only you have the authority to do that. They vote the bottom line. You probably sat in town meeting where some of the other town departments had to go at the end of the year and they may do these adjustments, like line item transfers within the budget. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go to town meeting to do that. So you have total control over the line items of the budget. Usually a couple of times a year, the administration might bring some transfers to you to balance out the accounts at the end of the year. Once that approval from town meeting occurs and July 1st rolls around, the superintendent needs no further approval to start implementing the spending plan that's already been approved. He doesn't have to say, I'm going to start spending the money now. It's inherent as authority. We already talked about that. One thing I do want to talk about is how many of you do you sign warrants? Do you do it at the meeting, or do you do it beforehand?
Every Tuesday. Before we have to submit it to the town.
You go to central office?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Very good. It's really kind of interesting when I can't tell you how many school committees I've attended, school committee meetings I've attended, and they're in the middle of presentations and things are being presented to them and the paperwork's being passed from one person down the table. So all during that presentation, someone's not paying attention to the little thing because they're doing this. And they're not even looking at what they're signing, they're just looking for it. The only thing I can tell you about warrants, and the one piece of advice I have, because a lot of people, particularly newly elected members, will ask me, what am I looking for? You're looking for consistencies. You're looking at, why does this purchase order only have one signature and all the others have two? Why does this purchase order have a sequential number of 4 at the top and this one has 3? You're looking for discrepancies between the documents, and that just means you should ask more follow-up questions as to what that is. But that's what you're looking for predominantly, is inconsistencies. It's really hard to convince another person to defraud a school district if you're trying to defraud it. So that's why the 2 signatures is always important. And then you look at, if you look at the signatures, are they always consistent? Is it always the business manager and the superintendent? If it's a building-based bill, is it the principal and the superintendent and the business manager? So just get familiar with what a proper one's supposed to look like, just so you have an idea of what to look for. And probably the biggest challenge you face is after you've gone from candidate to colleague. And you may have had a platform, you may have had, campaign slogans, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When you got elected, and then you get elected, and you find out that you're one of 5, so you have to collectively make decisions, not that you can use them on your own. But at the same token, you may come in to any meeting or any presentation with a kind of a preconceived idea of how you might think you're going to vote. Well, this quote goes back to like the 1700s from Edmund Burke, who was a parliament in England, Britain. And it still resonates today in that as the elected representative, you owe it to your constituents to think, to use your brain and to think and to listen and take in all the information that's being presented and then make a decision. Even if it's different than what you originally came in thinking. It's using your judgment rather than the public opinion to make that decision. So it's real important that you allow yourself to listen to the newer information as it comes in, or listen to all the information and weigh it all equally, not just the latest and greatest thing that came in. So at this point, I know I kind of went really fast, but I'm also cognizant that you have a bunch of stuff to do tonight. So I wanted to respect that time. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take any.
Yeah, I do. So you did mention, the difference between school committees and Board of Selectmen, the Education Reform Act, etc. I'd like clarification on expectation in terms of, public participation. When you go to a Board of Selectmen meeting here in Medfield, there's dialogue. There's, a topic is brought up, I've got a question, and there's constant dialogue. For us, we're like, why do you sit there stone face? Why don't you engage with the public more, on topics constantly?
Well, it's important to remember, and probably the biggest misstatement I've heard in the last 2 years is I have a right, I have a right to speak to you. No, not in a meeting. The law is very clear that, in fact, no one has the right to speak at a public meeting unless recognized by the presiding officer or through a policy established by that body. And you have a public comment policy, so you've established your process. The biggest difference between a public comment or that open dialogue at Board of Selectmen is that many of the things that come up at those meetings, they can actually resolve because of the bigger scope of authority a Board of Selectmen has on everyday activities or the operational side of the town. You don't have that in your scope of authority. The superintendent does. You govern, he manages. That same model is not true on the municipal side. Like I said, there was no Board of Selectmen Reform Act of 1993. Because of that, it's a lot harder for you when constituents are asking questions about things you have no jurisdiction over, or no ability to correct. It becomes problematic because they get frustrated because you can't take action because it's not within your scope of authority, and it just kind of like sets up a disappointment, so to speak, ready to happen. Whereas the Board of Selectmen can actually get involved. They can actually assign one of their members to go check it out, so to speak. I remember when I was elected to the board on Saturday. I got sworn in on Monday. Monday night was my first meeting. Got home, my phone was ringing. It was a person who lived in a newer neighborhood in town and wanted me to actively close the farm that was in their backyard because the odor was horrific. It was just absolutely terrible, this odor. I was like, oh, where did you buy your house? And told me the name of the street. I said, oh, that's the pig farm. Okay. And when did you move in? In the winter? Yeah. How'd you know I moved in the winter? They said, well, because it's colder and the heat doesn't get to the pig slop, like in a better term, like it does when it's 95 and 80% humidity, which that last weekend was. And I said, well, the other thing you got to remember is that pig farm's been there for 150 years. All right, you bought a house next to a big pig farm. You can't miss it. You drive right by the entrance to get to where your neighborhood is. So I don't know what you expect me to do about that, but those are the type of things that selectmen get, that people have an expectation you can involve. And if it was some other circumstance in which I could have done a resolution, I could have actually gotten involved in that. You just can't. You're restricted as a committee in where your authority lies, and that's one of the reasons that your public comments are a little bit different than Board of Selectmen's public comments might be. But the reality is, and people have to understand, is that you're allowing public comment. There's no requirement for you to have public comment at all. There's none at all. And I'm not advocating that. Don't get me wrong.
Nor would we. Yeah.
I think it's important to have a dialogue, but as long as the dialogue remains respectful and civil, you can do that. The minute it crashes and burns, and we've all seen TV news reports about school committee meetings where the chairs have had to adjourn the meeting because it was so disruptive and they couldn't get things done. And there was one recent one where the chair had to adjourn the meeting because the audience wouldn't allow them to conduct their business. And on that agenda, they got adjourned with 3 field trips that the students were in risk of not being able to go to because the approval was necessary at that meeting because of the policy on field trips and approval time restrictions on how far out they had to be approved before they could go. So, ultimately the school committee scheduled a special meeting just for those field trips to get them approved, but that was a real risk. So your meetings are for a purpose, to conduct the business of the school district, and there are certain things you have to do. Now, there are times when you will seek out public input for very specific issues, and I've seen that before here. But that's really the basic premise difference, is because your scope of authority is different than a Board of Selectmen scope of authority. Answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I wanted to comment a little because I know that I've actually been through this about four or five times, this particular kind of like roles and responsibilities, and I always take something new away from them. Thank you. But while the roles of the school committee and the superintendent are legally bifurcated, at the same time, there is an expectation that the expert that you hire as a body has a body of knowledge that the 5 of us may not possess, and that we need to be able to have the trust, as we talk about it, to say, thank you, Dr. Marsden. We really appreciate you communicating your budget to us, your budget priorities that you have built throughout your administration and brought to us, and then question some of those, but not necessarily go in and say, but we know better, right? And that's just one small part of it. So that there is kind of instead of a this and a this, there's frequently a cog part of it, in that it is really quite silly to kind of operate under an assumption that simply by being a body of 5 people, we would know better than somebody who is an expert within educational administration and things like that. And that's one of the things that I think sometimes people look at the two kind of roles and say, well, you develop policy, so you should kind of just go out there and, cowboy a policy to make this happen, to make this procedure happen. But there is a kind of a long-term professional kind of understanding of how to run a school district. We all tweak it to our individual towns and communities and try to communicate that. But it is rare that a school committee will simply say, we're just taking this over. We don't appreciate your input and we're just going to slap this on there. Right. So that, I mean, I think that that's one of the things I've often picked up from the MASC is how important it is to have a respectful working relationship with your superintendent. And that, you know, we've certainly all seen communities kind of blow apart when that is not the case.
It's a really good point, and it kind of goes back to my point about vision, mission, goals, objectives. And if you're constantly changing the players, then it's really hard for the staff to buy into any long-term stuff because every 2 years it's switching. You know, we're going over here now, we're going over there now, we're doing this now. Or if a new superintendent was to come in and absolutely hated a program that you've been working on for 4 years and killed it, it kind of like, you know, what about all that staff time that they committed to try to get that program running? So, you know, that every measurement tool out there that's available that has been used, it clearly indicates that the longer a school committee and superintendent stay together, the higher, more improvement in student achievement levels. Because it stayed focused. Now, I don't mean that as a changing one member or two members of the school committee. You can change players, but as long as the vision's maintained, meaning if somebody comes in and buys into the same mission vision, and you're still moving off in that northeast direction, so to speak, you can continue on even though individual cogs may have switched. Same is true even on the administrative side too. If I was too young, but if he was to retire and you brought someone in who is of the same mind or shares that same vision, you can still continue. But if that relationship is fractured, now you're just kind of like going around in circles. And I don't mean like around the drain, but you're just kind of like spinning your wheels, so to speak. You're not moving forward, not moving backward. You're just kind of stagnant. Everything feeds from the top. The momentum for the district is here, and this is where it lies. The work that you do is so important to try to keep the momentum going forward for the district, so that when that student walks across to pick up that diploma, that vision that you had way back when they were kindergartners, do we meet it? And that's your ultimate judgment: is did we meet what we had set out to do? What was the goal we set for ourselves, and how did we get there? And what progress did we make during all that?
Thank you.
I just had one, or almost two. I'll give you a minute to think. But if there's anything you heard or thought of that was top of mind as you listen, but you don't have to answer right away or not at all. And just the goals and the monitoring success. I almost think of when we talked about the 5-year plan that we're going to start on shortly. I remember him saying, as part of that 5-year plan, some of the districts put the system in place right then and there to measure success. I think I know the answer, but who owns the administrative work to effectively track the performance of the goals?
I'm sorry?
Who would, if we want to monitor the goals,
mm-hmm.
My assumption is that's, the superintendent or the administration is going to come back and say, this is how we perform on the goals.
Well, if it's a district goal per se, when you set the goal, you've established how you're going to measure it. And then you schedule regular interviews intervals in your school committee meeting to get updates. So whether it's the superintendent or someone else on the administrative team to gather the data, we talk about data-driven decision making. If you have it scheduled and people know in advance, then the information is available to you. It's unfair to come to a meeting. And I'm not saying I'm not indicating you're saying that, but you say, hey, how are we doing on that goal without any prior warning that you even want to talk about it. So if it's a goal that you've set, the committee has set for itself, well then you're the monitoring agent, and you would determine what tool that's going to look like, and what does success mean? The whole SMART goal acronym. And the same is true if it's a district goal or a superintendent goal. Well, that program's already established. There's a mid-cycle review and then an end-of-year review with articles of evidence presented to determine whether the superintendent met his goal or not, or whatever the particular goal was. So, and then you would make a determination whether you feel those articles of evidence support his position on that goal. And the same is true for any goal set for the district. When you develop a strategic plan, there are a series of strategies to get to the overall arching goal. There's a set of strategies that you say, we have to do this, and this. It's like, when does this need to be done? How are we going to determine whether it's done? How are we going to measure it, and so forth? And all of that evidence gets accumulated and presented.
Anything else? Now, I would like to propose, as we have an expert here, and that we change the order of the agenda and bring up our policy discussion. On the Medfield School Committee policy on public comment. Sorry, do you mind sticking around?
Do you want to take a seat?
Yeah.
Or, we have another microphone there. You've been standing for quite some time. I want to make sure that you're okay.
I've been sitting all day, so this goes good.
But I'd like Tim to take the lead on this, as you've been doing a lot of the work as on the subcommittee. I know Leo's new on the policy subcommittee, but Tim has been working on it for the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, no, it just, and I'm just looking on the notes. Yeah. So I think we presented, and let me get the official policies, but we presented BEDH, which is the public comment at school committee meetings, and BEDHE, which is the guidelines for public comments in our last meeting as an informational item. The process we went through, and I think, personally, I had gone through one of the seminars this summer. I'll be honest, personally, I was always a little confused with exactly how our public comment worked as to when you can speak on what matters can you bring up, and if they're on the agenda, how do we handle it, and how do we handle it? It was a little bit confusing to me, but they had MASC has some recommended policies which I thought were a little easier to work with, and they also had a seminar where there's one that is very, very similar. So I reviewed those, fairly extensively. I reviewed ours, and I made a suggestion, which is what I presented in the most recent meeting, for something that really I think protects most of what we've have in our policies, with a couple of changes. And I think there's one that I think is more of a nit, which is accounts for signing up. I think we say they may sign up for that, and
I
we
don't
don't
quite understand do we send out a Google form or?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Is a sign up common?
Is it necessary?
It's a housekeeping technique in that the minutes have to reflect, legally have to reflect every person who spoke at your meeting. And sometimes it's hard to capture, when they just come up and say their name without having some record of who they were. Because it's not only name and address of who was at your meeting, to who spoke to you. If someone sits in the audience and doesn't speak the whole time, then obviously that's not a requirement to capture who that is.
So do districts who do that, do they have a Google form or something that they
No, it's
send
usually
on?
just a clipboard out on a table, and they just.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if we're taking Zoom comments, also there's how do you
Well, there's
make
new
that work
ones
as well?
Would be similar. The person would have to say their name and
Mhm.
address, and
Yeah.
someone would have to write it here.
Right.
Right.
The only other time would be if you anticipated a lot of people coming, or a lot of people were in the room. You might I know it's been common that obviously no one speaks twice until everyone's spoken once. But at the same token, if you're just going to reiterate something somebody else said, is let somebody who has something different to say talk.
Yeah, so there's just one area that I'll call out, and we're not going to. The intention is to discuss it. We're not voting on it tonight, anyways. But that was, I think, the one gap there was we don't have a process officially around sign up. So we would just have to think that one through.
It's not overcomplicated. It's simply you need something to capture for the minutes for the meeting.
My main question about this change, potential change, is the perception. So the culture here in Medfield. People want to be heard. People want to speak, and we respect that. But by changing it, I'm getting some feedback that we're killing essentially public comment. Or we are, just reining it in a little bit more by restraining. Because so our current policy is if we are voting on something or if there's a discussion after every agenda item, we open it up to public input.
It's not actually even if we have a discussion, though. It's, technically, although we frequently waive this through procedure, it's supposed to be after every single agenda item, which becomes burdensome in terms of conducting the business of the committee.
Right. That's the part that to me, I would take it my own perspective. So say you're really eager to speak on a specific topic, and we say you can speak on any topic that was within our purview, except those that are on the agenda.
Well,
if you want to speak within those agenda, you wait for that period, and then we can bring that in. And it's confusing and it's awkward. So I thought it was. I looked at it as twofold, and then I'll send it over. I thought simplify so you can speak about any topic during public comment. We don't have to say, "Oh, hold off on that." We're going to cover that in about 2 hours.
Yeah, it's extremely awkward too, as chair, frankly.
Which should, and then procedurally, I think we do want to be a little more careful. And I think this was something you said as we're looking at the policy manual process, getting a little more of a rhythm. If we are going to vote, it's always discuss meeting 1, vote meeting 2. And we do that for the higher topics.
Therefore, the public would still have an opportunity to speak or to comment before we vote.
In that scenario, and again, we're not voting right now on this,
exactly,
but we will discuss it right now. If this is an agenda item, so we'll take public comment.
Yeah.
But if 6 months from now we're running with this new policy, we would discuss it right now. The public could still bring it up in the next meeting's public comment.
I suppose the point I'm wanting to make clear is that we are not curtailing public comment. No. We're just reorganizing
the time at which it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I just want to make that clear because I think there is a misperception that we're doing the opposite. But so in the policy as it's proposed, do we need to make that any more clear? Do we need to make that clearer?
Thoughts?
It essentially aligns with what the MASC has out there.
But
right now, is there a specific difference?
Is when the public reads it, do they understand it as such? Or do they misinterpret it as saying, wait a minute, we can't speak now? Are you kidding?
Well, that goes to BE. That goes to the second half of the policy, which is the BEDHE, right? And that's specific policies and procedures. So it really gives you this is one of those procedural policies that we were talking about.
The BEDHE form is kind of like an exhibit in that it's something that you could make available. I know that in some communities they simply copy that onto the back page of the agenda. And when they put out copies of the agenda for the public to look at, it's just on the back page of the agenda that here's the process for public comment.
Actually, I happen to I like that a lot. I like that suggestion very much. I know that, ironically, although I got an open meeting law complaint against this, I had done laminated.
Oh, yeah.
You remember, maybe, I don't know, 3 months in, I said, people should really know how to do public comment. Let's put them out on the seats and if I remember correctly, and for valid reason, and it was then included with the thing. But it was our own policy that we were putting out on the
seats. It's never
seats.
an open meeting law violation to provide more information than the public's looking for.
Apparently, we discussed it in the meeting, and so by not including it in the minutes, which was an oversight. But all right. Anyway, we move on. But it's that this was something that we were doing, a while ago, and then kind of we were doing that up until the time I think of the pandemic when we started doing remote meetings.
The chair always has the opportunity to invite comment after an item if they feel that it is needed or warranted, correct? I mean, even if it's not.
It is. You just have to be cautious in that you do it fairly and equitably.
Right.
You don't recognize the person who you know is going to say nice things, and you don't recognize the person who you know might not be saying nice things. So if you want to extend that, you have to be fair and equitable about it.
And you also have to be a very kind of a quick thinker in terms of how that might realize itself. It becomes kind of unpredictable. Just knowing, kind of having sat in Anime's seat, what you believe is done through the best of intentions may not always be perceived, and then you end up kind of losing community trust instead of simply being very specific with the rules.
It's also important to remember that your meeting is a meeting in public, not necessarily a public meeting. It's a difference. Those two things mean two different things. There will be times when you are seeking the public's input and you would host the meeting differently, in that it would be more of a hearing or an open dialogue with the community. And you are, much like your budget hearing, where you make a presentation and then you listen to members of the community, and you take that information in. There might be other times when you do something similar on another topic that you think warrants a meeting all on its own, and you let it be known that this is your opportunity to come and talk about this issue. I attended one 2 weeks ago in Plymouth where we were talking about redid their 2 elementary schools, and they were talking about they're both K-5 schools, so one school's under-enrolled, the other school's over-enrolled, so they're talking about redoing the line, that whole meeting was nothing but listening to people. They presented the information, here's our problem, here's the solution we've come up with, let's hear your take on that. And they spent 3 hours just listening to people. Ultimately, they went with the plan, the plan went as it presented, but most of the people thought the process was pretty fair. But
we've done that,
there are those times when it's just you just want to know what the community's thinking, and that's a way to do it as a hearing format. So there's always opportunities to solicit public input. At a regular business meeting is one way of doing it. There are multiple other ways too, where it's you're allowing them to speak.
Yeah, did you, Jeff, administratively too? Some of that. But part of it is as we, talking about updating policies. I also wanted to be really clear reading our process to do that, and one of the pieces was making sure response from the superintendent, report from any advisory committees assigned in the area. So I just wanted to see if you had.
No, I don't respond to that. I mean, I think what I see here is probably more typical in school committees and how they operate instead of every other agenda item. But I think the point of, Leo has said that the school committee chair at any point at any agenda item can ask for and solicit input.
Usually it's pretty well known if there's an agenda item on here that people have interest in, they make it known. And so,
And we also on our agendas typically put whether we're going to do or we anticipate a vote on something. Is that correct? Are we still continuing to do that? Yeah.
Yes.
So, people should, a reasonable human being would understand that there might be a vote within that thing were they to be interested enough to read the agenda and see the agenda item.
Right. And
So-
we need to speak to that
Mhm.
before we vote.
Which could also be done within this kind of redistribution or kind of grouping initially on, no longer kind of restricting that first comment period, but allowing it to be anything, including agenda items at the very beginning, which then gives us time to be able to say back and forth, and take those kind of opinions into account when we're having a discussion.
So normally, during our public input, it's not an agenda item and we do not respond.
Mhm.
So if we were going to change it, and so now they can speak to anything,
Mhm.
whether it be a new item or an agenda item.
Or just something that would fall under our purview at some point.
Correct,
Mhm.
correct. But normally, if it is during an agenda item, we do respond.
Mhm.
So,
Well, we don't
So
respond.
there's nothing in the policy though that
to
says
them.
that. Like that's the one thing. It's consistent. In general, we don't respond. I think we just talked about that.
I mean,
But
during
we're not changing the proposal is not making a change there. Procedurally, it's possible. I haven't always seen it. If we call public comment, it is part of our agenda item. We're having the discussion, and that's where we've been sometimes a little inconsistent. Is the public comment at the beginning of the agenda item or at the end of the agenda item? Typically, at least, it's before we vote,
Mhm.
right? And then hey, somebody may say something, and we say, you may say, let's talk about it a little more.
But
I
that-
don't look at it as a change.
But that's not
though.
within the policy that we are currently discussing. What we're saying right now, and please, because this is how I'm reading it, so if we're doing this differently, please let me know. We are opening at the beginning of this policy would allow us to open a consistent period at the very beginning of the meeting in which people could discuss any issue, either on or off the agenda. We would take that public comment into into consideration, but we are not having a dialogue, right? That part continues, although we can always, as we have always said, can ask clarifying questions with the permission of the chair, right? So what we were simply doing is kind of rearranging how that public input comes in, right? So if, and we are not encouraging a dialogue in the midst of the agenda. We're not adding additional burden onto the business procedures that we have here by then stopping, unless we find it, necessary or we really feel that that's important. We're not stopping the agenda in the middle, nor are we having a dialogue during that period of time. Our affect, our ability to listen, our kind of responsibility to listen neutrally continues. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So it's really more about a change in how we clump these items together instead of bringing things to a screeching halt every agenda item. Okay, all right, thank you. I knew that was it, but
the culture
exactly.
of listening to
Mhm.
what the public has to say.
Right.
Yeah,
And then we still continue to really encourage people to reach out directly to the committee before or after. And do we continue to be committed to having those emails on specific agenda items attached to our minutes as part of the public comment as well? Because I think we had a discussion about when people email us, about specific agenda items that we would be considering before the meeting, we would also include those within the minutes, right? So we need to start kind of figuring out a way to make sure that that process happens, because I think it's equally important for people to know not just who stood up, but also who commented, because I think the transparency is really about knowing all of the conversations in the room and not just the ones who have the courage to come up and stand. But that there's a lot of communication that happens that isn't always demonstrated at the meetings, and I think that's important for us to put out there. So, thank you.
I look at it, but I agree with almost everything just said, and violently
winning.
Maybe that's not the right word. I think of it as operationally we're changing the way we do it, so it's done at the beginning. Any topic can be raised. I think if it's done at the beginning, and they may say something insightful that during our discussion, it may cause me to say, "Hey, Michelle, tell me more about that." That's how I look at it. I don't fully comprehend the last piece about what emails we would publish. I just think that we have to be careful because that could be operationally burdensome. An email could cover 9 or 10 topics, and how do we do? Like we might.
That is rare.
I'm just suggesting that we sometimes have all the right intentions, and we might inadvertently put ourselves in drive a consequence that we didn't want.
So we can look at that
I just look at that I'm not. That piece is, at least it's not. I'm not, as it stands right now. That's not in the policy.
Yeah, but that's again, I think that's also procedure rather than policy. But I do feel strongly that every voice that's in the room needs to be seen in public in some way without on a specific issue. We've had some that are, we get enormous amounts of email and lots of people who are very concerned about things and have really insightful ideas. And I think that those people who have taken that time also deserve the acknowledgement. And then there are times where it seems as though there must be a huge swell of opinion given what we see here at the meeting, but we never hear anything else about it. So I think that there's a level setting in terms of how do we express to the community really, truly, transparently where we're getting input into our decisions and how we're thinking about them.
Oh, Mr. Hart, what do you think about that?
Can I say my joke first?
Oh, sure.
Do you ever see Jeopardy? Or no, not what's that show where you can phone a friend?
Oh.
Like phone your expert. I would say, coincidentally,
Right.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I'm sorry, we needed a lighter moment. So that's where I was going. I'm only funny once.
How do you hear tonight?
Aren't I lucky?
Unlimited friends, though.
I feel lucky.
What was the question?
So what Jess was talking about in terms of, say there's a topic, people come up, public comment, their name, their address is all recorded for the minutes, yet we also get emails.
And we solicit the emails on our agendas. We say anyone may
read into the record.
No,
or they just
We would include them with the minutes, because the public comment here is summarized.
Right.
And we would need to find some sort of way.
If I think of what Tim's piece about multiple components to that, as long as they meet the standard for public disclosure, so meaning, when you read your opening statement for public comment, you talked about things that could not be shared. The same fall true for the emails. There are just things that can't be without following certain steps to be able to be discussed at a public meeting because of the way the open meeting law is written. So if somebody was using the email to bypass that, to be able to file a complaint against an employee of the district in public, and you attach it to your minutes,
We wouldn't
became
do
a
that.
public document, and you didn't allow the person 48 hours notice, they didn't have the right to be here, all the other requirements that are built into the law, then that would be a problem. So something like that, you may have to redact that with an explanation as to why you redacted it in the minutes.
Mhm.
But if, yeah. Did that answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, I think it just because I don't know enough about it. Like I would almost suggest if we're
well, usually
maybe we
somebody, I'll be honest with you, I think most of those type of emails come in on anonymous. They're like from weird email addresses and stuff.
Oh no, not here. And a lot of them have really great, and we have really great input. But people who feel as though they don't want, again, it's the worry I think everybody has, about like, some people don't like to speak in public. We try to be as open as we can be. We directly solicit opinions through our SCC, our school committee chair. Thanks. Email. So if we're directly soliciting those opinions, then I also think that we owe it to the public to broadcast those and let people know what input is influencing our decisions individually as well as a collective body.
I'd like to suggest that we think on that, that each person, because this is that's a lot to think about, and I think it was important to get Jim's feedback, and I think it's good to hear both of you, but I personally would like to let that macerate a little bit more, and then we can bring that up at another school committee meeting.
That's fine. Sounds great. I just wanted to make sure, because I do know that I had proposed it previously when we discussed this.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that we don't lose that particular thought.
So procedurally on this one, though, I think it would just be, and I want to make sure again, I just said some notes on it. So it's a discussion item tonight. You folks haven't heard much as well. If there's any changes we want to put into this policy, the next week or the next meeting would be, either additional discussion or a vote to adopt or reject.
And we'll post this online.
Yeah, it's been so. What I was just seeking clarity relative to references around email. We can obviously, that can be a discussion next week.
Yes,
are you suggesting we would continue at least proceeding to, with the next meeting as discussion and potentially a vote?
Potentially, yes.
And
I
again,
have one question about the policy.
Yeah.
On BDH, so not BDHE, the second paragraph, it says the public comment period is available to all residents of the town. This past year, we've heard from some teachers that have spoken eloquently on some of the subject matters that were emotionally driven. So I'm just curious if there's an additional line we want to add there of whether it's the or discretion of the chair, perhaps, if somebody does want to speak that isn't a resident of the town.
Mr. Hardy?
It's common to say residents of the town or employees of the school district.
Yeah, because I was going to say that was the one area that I didn't have that. It's worth putting in, because we had said
usually when employees are coming, they're not doing it during public comment though.
We've had that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we have. We say because we did say to residents of the town and to all students, families of students enrolled in the school of the district. That was something we added that was not in the MASC.
Can we wordsmith that just a little bit to be a little more inclusive in terms of families and guardians?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that would.
Okay.
All right. And employees.
So, and I think employees, I don't. My immediate reaction is I don't see an issue. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. You always think about what bad things happen, and if they feel violently opposed to something. But hey, if they're violently opposed, it's going to reflect in the classroom down the road as well. Yeah. So it's better to get the input.
Okay. So just like Dr. Morrison said, so now we'll post this
Put it on the website.
on the website, and then folks can comment via our email.
Mhm.
And-
So, but we'd be making a couple of changes and we're going to post the changes. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Jim.
Any other comments? Oh, yes. I am, Chris. Yes, please, come on up. And also if you can check online too, please.
Chris Bott, 7 Curve Street. So I think my initial reaction to the comment that this is not removing an opportunity for public input, that it's not taking away public input, it's just not true. It's just not true. Because at this point in time, with our current policy, somebody could come to the meeting, speak during the 3 minutes of public input. If there was a vote that was of concern 3/4 of the way of the meeting, they would have the opportunity to say something. So there, you are removing that opportunity for someone to say something mid-meeting before a vote. Now, the other issue though is that essentially you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I mean, after 9 years of attending school committee meetings, more often than not, I'm the only one sitting in the room, staying for the entire meeting. Very rarely anybody, even before votes, even after long discussions, no one raises their hand. Hardly any time people raise their hand to say anything about anything that's on the agenda. So you're trying to solve a problem that does not exist. So with any kind of policy changes, especially one that's not really mandated, like student activity accounts or discrimination, there's no legal impetus to change this policy. And with all due respect to Mr. Hardy, I respect him. I respect Mass Association of School Committees. There are hundreds of school committees across Massachusetts. It's important with any kind of policy that you look at what is the unique culture of the school district that is looking at a policy that's not legally, this is about the culture of our community. Public input is about the culture of our community. There's no difference between Board of Selectmen and school committee. They're on the same election ballot. They have to abide by the same open meeting law and ethics laws. The chair has the same level of responsibility to manage the meeting as the chair of the school committee. It has no bearing on how public comment is handled at a selectman meeting versus a school committee meeting. Not at all, not one bit. Public comment is one of those rare policies that are not just driven by statutes. Comments before votes are informed votes. And tonight is a really good example. Someone during this public input, if the new policy had been in place, could have gone up and talked about all the reasons why this public input policy shouldn't be changed, but they hadn't had the benefit of your discussion. I'm sitting here and I'm having the benefit of your discussion, so I can actually provide thoughtful, informed comments as a reaction to what your discussion has been. The other thing that really concerns me is that over the last 9 years of attending school committee meetings, I can list off numerous examples when there was no indication that a vote was going to be taken at a school committee meeting. Didn't show up on the agenda. Sports fees, increase in sports fees, increase in school lunch prices. These just came out of the blue. Extension of the preschool school day, extension of the elementary school day. That appeared on an agenda basically every single month. There was no indication when the actual vote was going to happen. Budget increases after the public hearing. That came out of the blue. That was voted on in the middle of a meeting. If you change this policy and you decide you want to double the school budget, or you want to make significant cuts, what you're basically doing, if you don't let people know in advance, is they're not going to have the ability during the meeting to say, before you vote, I'd like to comment on that. So this is a really dangerous thing. The thing that scares me the most about this is that the last time that this was proposed in 2015 was that it was followed by some very significant changes in the district. So what this feels like to me is that this is a foundational step to make sure to keep people quiet, because there are some changes that are going to be happening down the road. And that is what I've experienced directly after attending school committees for 9 years. This is a very dangerous thing. It doesn't affect me. I no longer have kids in the school. But I'm going to tell you, I'm very, very worried about the future parents who are coming into this district that are going to lose the very special culture that Medfield has had for years, with great community engagement through all kinds of mechanisms. This is a problem. We don't have a problem with people speaking up at the end, in the middle of meetings. It just doesn't exist. I'm probably the only one. So if you want to change the policy to keep me quiet, go for it. But I'm pretty informed about what's going on in the district. And I'll still have that 3 minutes at the beginning of every meeting to speak up about what I see and what I feel are real problems with how these decisions are being made. This is a dangerous decision. And I'm going to ask you to just to abandon it. Or at a minimum, change it so it's just people have comment before votes. It's really important. And I just think it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Ultimately, it's going to hurt the students. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any comments online?
So, no reason.
No.
I don't see no.
All right. So, next steps is will be posted. We will have another discussion, potential vote, the next meeting, and we encourage folks to reach out to us. All righty. So, I think you agree.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
So
Thank you very
appreciated.
much.
Yeah,
Very
thank
much
you very
so.
much for coming. I didn't know you were on the South Shore too.
Thanks again. Alrighty. So, next on the agenda in order is the appeal of superintendent's decision on library books, the process discussion. So, we have to come up with our own process because it hasn't been outlined. We did get one appeal. My initial suggestion is to read the books, which I think many of us already have, or at least one of the two. Two, perhaps have an open session meeting just on it, on the appeal, and invite the person who submitted the appeal. It would be an open meeting, so we would take public comment, public input, and then we could then have perhaps establish that we make a decision within 10 days or whatever amount of time that we have, that we decide.
One question.
Yeah.
So just to like back this all up. So there was some residents that submitted that they wanted these pieces of periodicals or literature reconsidered, right? So a committee met in order to do that. 9 people total, I think, right? Yes. Okay. So then the reconsideration committee read the books, came together, came to their decision, right? That was then handed to Dr. Marsden. Dr. Marsden made his decision, and now one person has appealed that decision.
Yeah.
If we are going to have a meeting, an open session, open up to public input, are we then opening up more people coming forward to
Either support or refute. So I'm asking
So we know.
That's what I'm just wondering. I just feel like if we
So we
already
have to establish a process for appeals. Is that what we're
they can do that
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
They can do that anytime.
Right, but I guess I just feel like we already have a process in place and people already submitted themselves. Like, are we then, like, if people come and
No one else can appeal at that point.
okay.
Yeah.
So it would just be that one person that we'd be listening to whatever that individual had to say, but then other people would be able to comment to either support or,
Well, I think that's part of the process, right?
yeah, okay.
I mean, we have
Just
to
clarifying, like,
decide
how
if
this
that's
would
part
work.
of our process too.
Yeah,
I
so-
would say yes, but that's
So-
it's open to discussion now.
So, and I was thinking about it because and Jess, I may defer to your judging too because I know you've spent more time than I have looking at policies. I agree. My read on it was the policy does, the administration follow their process. If people can appeal to the school committee, and then once they appeal to the school committee, it's unstated what's going to happen. That was my read, and is that consistent with everybody else? Like, or does anybody have a different read?
Well, our policy states that the superintendent makes.
He makes a decision, and then somebody can choose to appeal. So then my question then, and it's more for discussion, what are the possible outcomes that might occur after that appeal?
well, one outcome
Because we should be
is,
thinking.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, everyone's going to be more informed. That's a
Yeah.
positive element. But what are the what then? I think it's worthwhile that we all know what we're shooting for.
What are the options?
Yeah.
I would. There are two options, right? Either we uphold the decision made by the superintendent, or we don't.
But if we don't, does
And
that
if
mean
we
the books
don't,
get
then what
removed?
happens?
It's your choice.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
we decide whether or not those books are good or not.
I think that we should think a little bit more about before we. I mean, yeah, it's an either or we go in and say, we don't think this should be in this school, but we go to that school. However, in every educational decision we make, we also rely very heavily and appropriately so on the professionals that we have hired. So I would think that this would be a decision in which we would review the committee's process, listen to what they have to say about the material that's being questioned. And in that kind of airing of that at this one community member's kind of request, given that we are then able to listen to the same information that Dr. Marston used to make his decision that these 9 educational professionals made to make this decision, we are able to measure apples to apples truly whether that feels appropriate within the scope of our policies, because we have to look at it from policies. So we have to identify what policies could impact this decision if we really need to make a policy decision around this. And then we need to listen to the exact same information and have a summary of kind of what those conversations were like. So it would involve.
So you didn't read our summaries.
I mean, I did. Yeah, I have. And so that's, so like, how do we
Read the summaries.
read the summaries,
Yeah.
listen to our, yeah, and then, make a decision from there. But we have to do our homework, but we also have to establish that we are looking at the same apples as everybody else and that we're hearing the same information. And we also need to identify the specific policies that these, so it's not just library policies. It's also, it's also the policies around, equity, learning materials, things that would specifically affect these particular things. But I think we could outline that process fairly easily. It's not, it seems simple.
The procedure.
To me. Yeah.
Yeah. To me too. So
Yeah.
Read the books, reread the policy, the reports.
Words.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a special meeting. I don't think it should be embedded in a regular meeting. It should have its own meeting. And we invite the person who appealed to speak, and if anyone else does, they have a right to. And then we establish that in X amount of days, we'll have a decision.
Yeah. I also think I would encourage us to do this as soon as possible. These books have been off the shelves, or at least not available, for some time, and that haunts me.
I don't.
They're available?
Again,
Okay, good.
I'm still
Good.
I'm okay. I think right and rushed are two things, and I need to. I may be the only one. So if we were to request to change that decision, it's not crystal clear to me what policy we have that allows us to do it. It's not crystal clear to me, and I would like to have that.
So embedded in policy discusses a district process. So this is part of the district process, not a policy. So there's a reconsideration policy, and then embedded in that it says following the district process. But we've done the reconsideration committee, and then sending it to me is the district process, which the last part of that would be an appeal to you folks.
Yeah, and I guess it's understood that with the appeal, we can choose to say yes or no.
Right.
And I think, and I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a bad position. If we said no, we disagree. Does that, are we? I want to validate we have the authority.
Sure.
On that.
We do, but I don't like the precedent.
I honestly think it goes against everything that we just listened to Mr. Hardy say for the last, for the last hour and a half.
Which I think is which would be part of the process, or the dialogue that we have, the discussion we have during that appeal process.
Right.
Right?
I think the feeling as part of the process was that if someone didn't agree with the superintendent's decision, or someone has not agreed with that it would make sense for a board of residents to make that decision to override the superintendent. That was the thought behind that process. Or agree with it, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
regardless, we have to move forward.
Yeah.
We have to come up with
But I also don't think it helps anything to kind of linger on this very much. I think it's been going on for quite some time. It's unsettling to the district. It leaves, if we're thinking kids first, it leaves kids in limbo, right? There's some decisions that we would make regarding material that they have access to or not. It leaves them in limbo about, and it does imply some decisions around what we think is appropriate or not. And I don't believe in just leaving that out there. I'd really like to have it closed up as soon as possible.
Sure.
One way or another, however we do it. We got to think about kids first.
To that.
Yeah.
I really don't.
So, of course, it's December. Do we want to try to set a time for that here? Or do we want to kind of...
I'm happy to. I'm just away until Christmas.
Oh, right.
As of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
we might have to do this
I think it's important
in early
that
January.
all members of the school committee
Yes.
are there, because I think members of the public really want to know where each of us stands.
Mhm.
And I think it's important that they do know that.
Yep.
So I would propose maybe
Early January?
January.
Okay. We also have a meeting already in the first week of January, right?
I don't think we're ready. I thought we were ready till the 12th.
Is it 12? Okay.
So we can figure that out, but we can aim for the first week of Jan. Are you traveling a lot early in the new year? No? Okay, cool. So great. All right. So if you haven't read the books, read the books. Reread the report.
And May, do you want to specifically for the record state which books they are so that people know?
Yes.
Yeah.
All Boys Aren't Blue and Flamer. Those are the two books that we should all read if we haven't read, and reread the report.
Yeah, and the report is posted on the website.
It's all online.
Right. So the public can also see what the decision-making process is there.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Does that sound fair? And once we have a date, we can reach out to the person who made the appeal and obviously announce the meeting, etc. All right. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Is there any public comment on that? I'm not voting, but I don't see any.
Do you have any public input on that? Okay. Great. Updated student handbook, or any comments online? Sorry. No. Okay. Updated student handbook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we talked about at our last meeting, there's some changes to Chapter 71, Section 37, Issue 3/4. What was in your materials are the actual code of conduct for the high school, middle school, and then the elementary schools that share one handbook. And you'll see that the items that are highlighted in red are the changes. So we worked with our council to do this. I was fortunate enough to have a meeting with a few superintendents and the commissioners this afternoon. DESE has not put together any regulations around this yet. They were kind of caught up. It's kind of embedded into this new law that started in August. They were caught off guard a little bit. So they're putting together some regulations for districts and some guidance that the commissioner told us today was probably going to come out at the end of December or early January. So we'll be looking for that guidance, but I think we need to get ahead of this and make sure that it's in our handbooks Once, if you agree to vote this tonight, it will go in the handbooks tomorrow, and then I'll notify parents as well. So we need parent notification. The staff, so we notified the staff as soon as these changes came in place, just so they would understand kind of where it was and what was going on with this. So the two final pieces are you folks approving it, and we'll put it in the handbook, and then we'll notify parents after that.
And just to clarify this, these are essentially mandated, and
It's a law.
Yeah.
It's a law.
So there's very little choice around this.
No, it's a law.
Yeah. So given that, I think I'd be willing to put forth a motion to change the handbook to reflect the changes as written and shared with the committee to the middle school and to all of the student handbooks within the district.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Michelle, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, any other items since posting? Okay, great. Old business, budget.
Right, so as you know, each December we do our initial budget presentation. So I think Michael's going to share his screen. I'm going to go up here and go through about 10 slides or so. Go through those. So each year we go through a similar process in which we meet with all of our principals, our directors, all of our department chairs, and just get a sense of what they're looking for and what they need in their budget for the following year. So it's it is one of those things that this early in the year we're already asking people to think about what they want for next September and beyond. So it's kind of a tough process for people to go through, but our folks do a great job of that. So Michael and I have all those meetings. We start usually in the month of November, and then we develop a budget and we present that initial FY24 budget each year in December. Next one, Michael. So it's just really important to understand, what this process is like and what tonight's initial budget is. It's a first pass. It's a draft. It's really just taking all the input that we got from folks and putting it together in a budget. The next 6 weeks, we're going to fine tune all of the numbers, the requests, and then we prepare the superintendent's recommended budget for our public hearing, which is on January 26th this year. You folks take ownership of that after the public hearing, and the budget is not final until annual town meeting. It's just really important. Like sometimes we hear feedback about, the initial budget this, initial budget that. It's just a draft. And we try to get a really good ballpark figure of what we're going to be looking at. But the real work happens in the next 6 weeks and the weeks beyond that when we start meeting with the warrant committee and then start doing that whole process. When we developed this budget, we had some assumptions. One of them is that our entitlement grants will be level funded, and that's mostly our special education at 94-142, which funds a lot of our special education staff and services, not including our ESSER. ESSER were those one-time grants that we got. We had ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We are still working with ESSER 3. ESSER 3 brings us the nice things like the late bus that we have this year, those kinds of new things that we started. It looks like we're probably going to have enough to carry over ESSER 3 next year to do a late bus free of charge the following year as well. Chapter 70 will be level funded. That's the state aid that we get, and Medfield does not get a lot, probably $6 million. We get the minimal aid there. Possible expansions of our tuition-based programs. So one of the things that we're exploring right now is how can we get more of our preschool kids involved in the public schools. We don't have any room at Memorial, and if we're going to do modulars, it wouldn't be done in time because of town meeting in May in order to do it for next year. So we're looking at other spaces in the community and the district to possibly expand our preschool program, and I'll have an update for you in January as we kind of move forward with that to see where we are and run it by you folks. And then circuit breaker, as you know, is our reimbursement that we get for special education, and we're looking at that being 70%. We did meet with the commissioner today, as I said earlier, and we're asking that we would make a priority legislatively to have it funded at 90%. The legislation is 75%, never been 90, but we're looking as an association to raise that to 90% reimbursement. As always, we try to put some revenue together, and we really fine-tune this in January, and then we'll have a really good number by March or April. But looking at the revenue that we generate, we think it's important to share that with the community, that we have over $670,000 state and federal grants, our pre-K and kindergarten tuition, our school lunch receipts, athletics receipts, other receipts that come in, our private grants and gifts and circuit breaker, all of that together. As you know, that slide I always do where I say that it actually takes X amount of dollars to run the district, not actually with the budget that's approved at town meeting. So those are our early projections with the revenue, but we'll have that fine-tuned in January.
Okay.
And
Dr. Morrison, I have a quick question.
Yep.
You are proposing to get the circuit breaker at 90%.
Right.
Is that due to the really significant inflation costs around 766?
Yes.
Tuition?
That's a part of it. So the other,
Okay.
thank you for bringing that up. As you know, we talked about the last meeting that the increased costs went up 14% for FY24, with it typically around 2 to 3%. So in a district like ours, that's a couple $100,000. In other districts, it's over $1 million or millions. So one of the things we talked about with the commissioner today as well is if DESE would work with the legislature to provide a pothole fund, which will allow districts to apply for and receive one-time grants that would offset the increase of the 14%. The struggle is that you have many communities, especially if you're looking at some of the urban districts, who still have their ESSER 1 and 2 money, never mind their ESSER 3 money. And then you have communities like Westwood and Medfield and Dover-Sherburne and others that get minimal, and it's already gone. So what we have to do as an association, as a state, is to really work with our legislature to let them know that not everyone is flush with the cash from ESSER. And those districts that are smaller had to use that to maintain programs and do the improvements that they asked us to do, and we don't have any sitting in the bank like other places do. So that's kind of the rub right now statewide. But we're going to look at that pothole. They've had pothole money for circuit breaker for years. So if you have unexpected and anticipated special education students that move in with an outside placement, you can go to that pothole fund if it goes through a certain amount threshold and ask for additional money from the state. So we're just asking for that for next year. We'll see where that comes. We won't know about that until the springtime.
Jeff, what is undistributed receipts?
Michael, that gets me every time. You have all that.
I'm just curious.
So those are parking fees
Oh,
facilities fees.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Rentals and that kind of stuff.
Rentals, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
So the drivers are no surprise. The drivers that we have each year. Personnel, we're implementing collective bargaining agreements with all of our bargaining units right now. We had the 1-year extension this year with Unit A teachers, and now next year starts another 3-year contract. So we're fortunate enough to have a 4-year agreement with the Unit A Association. We also have a 3-year with our Unit B, 3-year with custodians, 3-year with cafeteria, and 3-year with our administrative assistants. So all those will be implemented in the FY24 budget. Transportation costs, both regular education, general education, and special education costs, and then student services. So looking at different programs and or outside placements for students or ELL students, those types of services that we need to provide for kids. Outside the operating budget, but still our budget drivers, both for the town and for us, looking at health insurance, which doesn't appear on our side, but certainly is a driver for the town. And then technology and facility increases, which will appear in our capital budget, are certainly budget drivers for both the town and the district, but do not appear in our operating budget. So looking at FY24, the initial budget, $41,739,158. Change in budget increases 5.65, which is a little bit larger than we've had in the last 3 or 4 years. That's certainly, again, we have some time to refine and go through some of that, but I think we haven't come in over 5 in probably 5 or 6 years. I think, like when I look back, when the last time we came in at that point. But we're still working through those numbers and trying to get a number that would be lower than that for our January public hearing. So the increase includes the following. Maintains our current staff and programs. The 0.5 increase to guidance counselor, memorial, WELOC, 0.5 assistant athletic director at the high school, 1.5 teaching assistants at Memorial Wheelock. Those were all in ESSER 3. So we paid for those in FY23 for ESSER 3. We embedded those into the FY24. So there's the funding clip we always talk about.
Mhm.
So the positions are still there. Now they go into the budget. So that's, again, things we need to talk about in the next few months. Cost of living increase, steps, lanes, and longevity. Increase to transportation, utilities, and supplies and services. Michael, what did we get from Eversource? Was it 64% for electricity or something? So we had a huge amount that we had to plan for our utilities going forward. So some things that we got to talk about and some real discussion points for the next few months. So one of the things that we need to look at is our student enrollment. Michael, can you get on that link? That's a hyperlink. And it'll be tough for you to see. Can you zoom in on the yellow down at the bottom? And I know this is on our website, so it's, if you want to refer to it after, but it's kind of tough to see. One of the things that we've noticed historically is that Medfield High School, as recent as 2013, 2014, was around the high 8s, low 900 numbers. And we have projections for the next 6 to 7 years of it being in the 7s, and the low 7s and some of the high 7s, depending on what year you're looking at. So we need to start looking at, our staffing and see what we have. It's kind of hard to staff a building that is 714 with the same staffing that you had at 905. So that's some of the conversations that we're looking at, whether it's looking at scheduling, whether it's looking at course offerings, those types of things at the high school. We just need to take a look at that, and we're working with the high school staff on that. But that's one area that we need to really look at and talk about. Electric rates, I know we're going to be, high, as we talked about. Is there going to be an impact with solar energy if we move forward with those projects? The capital budget with technology and facility upgrades, if for some reason some of the technology items don't go through capital, then we may have to absorb some of that into our operating. So we did talk about that. Out of district placements, that's always something that we look at. I think we have 22 right now, and we have some students coming back. So we're looking at the cost of that, but those change from now until we get to town meeting. And then the additional pre-K class, whether or not we can get either a full-time pre-K class or 2 half-time pre-K classes, meaning a morning and AM. We need to look at that. So those are kind of what we're looking at right now, and things that we'll have to talk about and bring to you folks as we get through the budget and see what the impact is. Some of the key dates coming up, and again, the process as we go forward. Upcoming school committee meetings, of course, meetings of the warrant committee and town officials, our annual public hearing that happens at the end of January every year, and then annual town meeting on May 1st. So that's kind of where we are, just working on it through November and some of December and getting to the point where we are, but we have a heck of a lot of work to do going forward. So the 5.65 is where we're at right now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jeff.
Yep.
Before the pandemic, we were working within our rotating funds to really start building up a capacity to kind of reduce tuition to full day K, so that eventually we could absorb that into the building into the budget over a long period of time.
Yes.
To offer free full day K to everyone. Is there even a glimmer of a chance to be starting to think about that again? We had to spend most of that down.
We spent a lot of it down, yeah.
Keeping our folks employed during the pandemic.
I think we can do that. I think we can eventually get to that point. It's what the school committee wants to do in that regard, because it's going to add a significant amount of money because we pay half-time teachers and all the supplies and all that out of that fund. So it's really
it's just about like how the process goes. I think I'd like to hear a little bit about how we might end up. It will be longer than we ever wanted it to be. But is it within our strategic plan as that starts to come up about how we start building those funds?
It's a good goal to put in there. I mean, I think when we approved, when the school committee approved it, when I brought it to you my second year here to start full day kindergarten, at the end of my first year, the goal at that point was within 5 years or after 5 years to get it in there, and then we have it. It's expensive.
And it's a long road, but I also know that it's one that the community really desires, and I fear sometimes that the kids that aren't in full day K are sometimes the kids who probably would benefit from it enormously. So
We've been great with, using sliding scales for tuition
Right,
and that kind
right.
of thing.
And you
When
have
folks
been-
need that,
yeah.
they reach out and we work with them on that. So we don't want to say that we just close the door on people because we
No.
don't. But certainly your point is well taken. There are definitely students that could probably use full day and may not be able to afford that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure. Anything?
I suppose my fear, when we were budgeting these positions and paying out of ESSER, the day has come.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it happened with, in 07, 08, 09, when districts did that, we got the federal money, it's going to happen to everyone. So
Yeah.
it's just how we're going to figure that out and what we're going to do and kind of reevaluate, what positions are needed and what, maybe aren't, or, those
Yeah.
based on students, based on enrollment, based on student needs. So just really going through that process the next, 4 months, and kind of really go through that. We have a better sense at the end of January where we're at with that.
I
But that
can't
process will
imagine
continue.
any school district in the state thinking that eliminating mental health positions or guidance positions would be,
Worked pretty hard to get them in there.
yeah, it worked hard and they're still needed. I mean, I think
Right.
there's no question about kind of the mental health needs of our generation right now.
We've gotten
And
a
their
lot of good
families.
feedback, and one of the things we'll do is share some of that data we get from the principals and the counselors that are working those positions that are funded for that. Because remember, there was no guidance counselors at all at the elementary
Right.
school years ago, right? So we
Right.
put them in there, and we've got some really good data on visits and supports and the amount of kids that they service. So I think we'll be able to share that and really make a good case why they should stay in there.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right.
I wish it were, a lot lower than 5.65, but we'll work on it.
Digest on that one. Thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda, new elementary school project. Well, we have our 4 appointees, folks.
Yay.
Yay, yes. So I'm very grateful and I'm very proud that, after application process, interview process, that we have appointed Robert Worth and Meredith Chamberlain, along with Michelle Perky and Jess Riley. So thank you very much for stepping up to do this important work.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Actually, while Scott's here too, I know you put an enormous amount of effort to try to get the community and get more candidates.
Ed,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ed.
Mazzella.
Oh,
His
okay.
warrant committee.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, that's cool. But you did. So are they expected to meet in December? Do we know?
I thought it was going to be a January start. That was my understanding.
Who drives that bus?
It's a great question.
It's,
Like, am I just sending an email being like, "Hey, team, when are you guys
Yeah.
free?"
first guy who sends the email is it. So, weigh your choices carefully.
Or first woman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I meant the gender neutral guy.
Yes, exactly. You know what I thought of when I looked at the list, it's nearly half and half. But I thought of the woman when the last time we had the outdoor town meeting, and the woman who came up to the mic and was like, "One woman on this committee, what's up with that?" And she walked away. And
She was absolutely right.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about this, and so I think this is going to be good. So thank you.
And it gives 50% of us the opportunity to look at somebody and say, no, I'm not taking notes.
Okay. Super. All right, you folks have been waiting very patiently. So right now we're on the letter of intent for solar purchase agreement and the charging stations. And Michael is going to speak, please.
All right, so we'll start with the charging station. So, my recommendation would be to the school committee, the energy committee approving is a 35 cents charge for the charging stations. The energy committee did do a nice job putting together a schedule for the charging stations. So they would be used by staff members throughout the day, from 7 to 3, and then from and also students that have electric cars. And then after 3 o'clock, there's a schedule for like 5 p.m. to 12 a.m. where community members can use it. Part of that agreement with the 35 cents that we would be charging is that there's a 2-hour limit, and anything over the 2 hours, right, which is going to give people a 15-minute grace period, would be charged $2 for every 15 minutes over the 2 hours. So what we're trying to avoid is the overnight parking, in the school, especially during the winter time when there's snow removal and we need to get the parking lots ready. So the vote tonight would be to accept the 35 cents and then also to accept, the schedule that's put together where there's restrictions on who can use the stations during the day. Do you have any questions on that?
Why, if we're concerned about overnight parking, which does seem to be an issue, why would we allow parking between the hours of, say, midnight to 6 at all?
We can also restrict it if we want to.
Okay.
But, if a storm comes in at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., we want to make sure that someone's not leaving their car there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And it also gives an opportunity for other community members to use the stations. So,
all right.
Any other questions?
Are these comparable to other rates?
So we did look at other rates.
Yeah.
They do range
Okay.
from 20 cents, I think, all the way up to 45, 50 cents. We took in consideration the escalation in prices, and we felt that 35 cents would be fair. We're going to reevaluate that after 6 months to see where we are. So it's for a 6 months period. We're going to reevaluate, look at things, and then make a decision from there. But we do think that 35 cents is fair, and that we're not on the high end, but we're not on the low end. And we're also trying, we don't want to, there's a cost with it also, right? And that would be charged to the school department. So the 35 cents will help defer the cost of the electric.
And those intervals, is that sufficient enough time to charge a vehicle like that?
Yeah, I think it takes half hour, correct?
Come on up, Billy. Wait, I'm not the chair.
Because I noticed
you tell her to come up.
There were limits, so teacher would have to go outside and move the vehicle during the day. Is that when I saw those?
I think we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
That's why, we are not asking for 12 limit during the school day.
Right, okay.
Only in the afternoons. It's not a long period. Some charging stations go up to 4 hours. But we do want to encourage, most activities don't take 4 hours in the afternoon. So
right.
we want to encourage turnover there too.
And just out of curiosity, like a typical electric vehicle, what would that cost is it the consumption rate of the kilowatt? I mean, yeah, so if in that half hour, how many kilowatts would it take to charge a vehicle? Like, is someone going to have sticker shock when they come out and see a charge on there for,
No, I don't think so.
No, it actually depends on your vehicle.
Yeah.
How it's charged. It's the built-in computer in your vehicle depends on how you charge.
Oh, I see. Okay. Just curious.
You're probably not aiming for full charge in 2 hours. It's a top up.
Yeah. Okay.
As Michael said, there's a basic charge, and then there's also a demand charge, which is hard for us to establish right now what it's going to cost every month.
Sure.
The thought is probably most of the money that would come in is not from the charging, but from the parking fee that people would just overstay.
Oh, yeah.
And those are relatively steep in this proposal. just because we do want people to move on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Very good. So do we have a motion to approve the rates proposed in this charging station document?
So moved.
So moved, Jess Riley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Leo Brem. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. That passes. Motion passes. Also, the letter of intent for solar purchase.
So tonight we're asking to authorize the superintendent to sign the letter of intent on behalf of the school committee to move forward, just to do research on the projects that were proposed in the past meeting. The Energy Committee did add one more project, which I think, the superintendent and I are good with, which is the solar panels here at the high school. So if we redo the gymnasium roof, which is a good-sized roof, we would be looking at putting solar panels on that roof. I did the same similar project when I was in my Dedham, and we were able to put about 250 solar panels on a gym roof. So just, something to think about, moving forward. So we wanted to add that as another project, part of this letter of intent, to just, go out there and look at the cost and see, the advantages or disadvantages of moving some of these projects forward.
So when do we have that one planned for, the high school roof? Do we have it within a 5-year plan? I mean, I don't want to mention anything, but there are hoses.
6 months.
Pardon?
6 months.
Okay. All right. That seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Do we have a motion?
No, I still had asked, Michael, maybe you would ask. I just asked always, like the 106,000 in year one. What is the total? Like, or,
Do have to put it up.
just helps me.
Your question is how do we come up with that?
No, I was just asking, if we save 106,000, what do we actually spend?
Oh, more than that.
It's not it's really a question more.
Is that
What's our, are you asking what our electricity costs are?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because when I see a savings of 106,000, I'm just like, is it of 10 million? Is it of 100,000? What exactly?
What do we spend now, you mean?
Yeah.
So what do we spend in electrical cost?
It's like 265 here.
So this building is 265,000.
Right. Those are the
Memorial's about 85,000.
the bills that you sign that you're like,
Yeah, I would
Holy
agree with
cow.
that statement.
yeah. I mean, a lot of other ones are very interesting, but those are the ones that you're like,
No, those were the first ones. I was like, what is going on?
yeah.
So
but
like if
it's
when I see 106,000,
We just got the bill today for
It's appreciable.
all 5 buildings, and today's bill was $63,000 just for electrical.
Can you turn those lights off over there?
For the
Yeah.
month of November.
right. It's really starting to go through the roof. And we did nothing extra, and turned off a lot of lights, and even our residential
So I do feel
doubled.
that, these projects would help, defer the cost that we are
Yeah.
experiencing right now.
The other thing, just on that recent 106,000, assumes that you would be paying, if you went to Eversource through Power Options, basically 13 cents a kilowatt hour. The current rate, if you went to the open market, is like over 20.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, so that's based on our current rate.
Just
Yeah.
based on our rate.
Yeah.
So this is based on projection that she was able to give us for beginning of 2024.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we're currently paying, was it 8 cents plus the
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. And then we spend
11 cents.
so yeah, and so like when I just look at the table, looking high school, Blake Memorial, year one, total 106,000. Like you give me figures and just high school plus Blake plus Memorial. What's our total energy cost in a given year?
So if I have to look at, so we're looking at the high school, we're about 265. Blake, we're about 125, 135,000 per year. And Memorial, we're about $85,000 per year.
So it's about 25%.
I won't
That
sneeze
helps.
at it.
Those are only the three main projects that doesn't involve all the small walkways and.
No, that gives me. I mean, that helps a great deal. That I was just.
Pretty big chunk.
Yeah, if it was like, and I could have probably estimated, but if it was like 2%, I would look at it a little different.
And we have to understand, I mean, we still won't be paying less. We just won't be paying that much more,
I
right?
understand.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I get
There's an emergent
that
part
was
to
the
this.
one thing I'd asked. I understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I also want to clarify, each project has its own LOI. Language will be similar between them, but the appendices will be spec to that project. So it's not just one letter of intent.
So do we need to vote them separately, or do we need to vote them?
No, we'll just authorize the
You just have to
superintendent
authorize
to
the
sign off.
Oh, gotcha.
So do we have a motion to authorize this superintendent to sign the letter of intent solar purchase agreements?
So moved?
So move Leo Brown. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Jess Riley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, community engagement and communication. Any updates?
We had our first informal conversation. Was that this past Saturday?
It was Saturday, yeah. It does seem a very long time ago.
Yeah. We had two individuals that came to meet with us. The first one kind of came originally just to listen, but we ended up having a nice conversation with the individual, probably about 45 minutes. We talked, they had some questions about public comment, about PTO versus site council, about 504 IEPs and the school committee's role in those. And then the second individual showed up closer to the end. That individual was advocating for higher sub pay or suggesting that permanent subs be in the buildings. The individual wanted to discuss kind of the sub shortage. Individual recognized what's kind of happening all around, but wanted to talk about some ways that Medfield could address the issue. So the next one we said would be virtual on 118, right? So we would need to get the Zoom license.
Okay, yes. Zoom link.
There's more than just one Zoom license.
It's good to know. And volunteers, if two individuals would like to go forward with that.
What's the date?
Well, we had said it was Wednesday 118, but I mean, I think technically we can adjust it. It was just Anime had suggested having it before the budget hearing so people could come ask questions if they wanted to about the budget.
Yeah, I can do it. Unless Leo can do it.
Which day is it?
Wednesday, January 18th.
Just look it up. What time?
It would be up to the individuals, but I would say 6 or 7
Yeah, I can do
to
that.
8.
Yeah.
Is there, did we look at the district calendar and see if there's anything specific that night?
Oh, yeah.
I did not do that, no.
We should probably just take a gander. Yeah.
But we'll confirm that we'll have 2 people.
Okay.
And I'm glad to as well, depending if.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you very much, Michelle, for
Oh, no problem.
this is great.
Social media stuff is still going well. Our followers are trending upwards. The posts that still get the most engagement are those Friday roundup ones. People seem to love seeing what's going on around the school district. So on that same path, I created a Google form to possibly reach out to staff. I didn't know where we stood with that. So that would be the next step in regards to like putting that together, getting that out there. I did meet with Nat. We had a good chat as well. He was excited about that concept as well. Yeah, I guess that's all I have right now for that.
Super. Anything else you want to add, Tim?
No, I would just say I did one of the PTO meetings. It was very impressed. I get to do WeLock. There's just so much going on that I was not even aware of. Highlights like I didn't even know they have a hug program. So new families are paired with existing families to kind of welcome them in, and I guess that goes on across the schools, which was great. But they're just, I've always viewed that I love all the organizations that volunteer, but the PTOs, I think it's like entrepreneurs who are thinking of 2 things: how can we raise money, and how can we have more fun and make it a better place for the kids. And it just jumped off the page at me during that meeting. So it was glad I went.
All right. And we discussed the policy stuff and any informational items, Dr. Murphy?
Can you do donations for us?
Oh, donations, sorry.
Okay, sure. So just a couple of donations, 3 donations actually. $1,500 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Norfolk County District Attorney to the high school gift account for Medfield being the 2021-2022 Team Rival 100-point champion. $400 from Veronica Shea to the Blake Middle School student activity account to be put in towards the spring 2023 trip to Washington, D.C. So Veronica works at Brothers. And the last 2 years, whenever I'm in there, she talks to me about this. And Michael as well. And so she's been wanting to do this, and of course, in the pandemic, we didn't go on any trips. And she said, you know what? When I was a younger parent and my kids went, I got some help. I wanted to return the favor. So she finally caught us the other day and gave us a check, and hopefully you'll accept that so we can put that in.
Wow.
She's wonderful. Just a great person over there. She's great. And then $1,000 from the Blake PTO to Blake gift account for Spanish. I ask that you approve as presented.
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Second. Michelle, all in favor?
Aye. And thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
It's just really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a little verklempt, quite frankly.
No, that might be 3 years she's been talking to us about it, but she's great.
Beautiful.
So one of the informational items I just wanted to share that I got an email right before the meeting. So I know that some of you got some feedback on the I Decide survey for the middle school level. That was MGH in coordination with MGH. So I got some feedback on it too, as you know, and I was getting emails from parents who never got the opt-out email. So we looked at it, and Nat and I looked at it, and it just didn't feel right that we were getting, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 emails about not getting the opt-out email if parents weren't happy with the survey. So we contacted I Decide, and we asked them to just wipe out all of the Blake Middle School data, because we didn't feel right about the fact that some people clearly did not get this opt-out email. It was too many people for it not to happen. We looked into it a little bit. Aspen was having some issues with their system around the same time this went out from Sharon. So it just felt right to ask I Decide. They were great. They sent us an email this afternoon. We've been playing phone tag for 3 weeks, I think. And they deleted and wiped out all of the Blake Middle School data. So Nat and I are gonna let parents know that either tomorrow or Monday. But I just want to let you know, because I know that you folks got a couple emails on that too. Then going forward, we're probably gonna look at that if we participate in I Decide again in that study. We're looking at it more of a 9 through 12 and not a 6 through 12 activity. So just wanted to give you an update on that, and then we'll let all the parents at Blake know that as well. It just didn't seem right. There's too many people that had concerns about it that couldn't find in their email an opt-out email from the school. So that told us there was something going on there. But some people did, because they opted out, but there were too many that didn't. So it just felt like the right thing to do to kind of scrap that completely. So that's what we're doing. That's what we did, and we'll let parents know about that.
Thank you. Lily, do you have anything to say? You've been so patient.
Not much. On the student council side, we just finished our can drive before Thanksgiving, and we got 2,586 cans, which was really good. It was like almost 900 more than last year, which is great. Now we're moving on to like our candy cane fundraiser. So we sell candy canes, but where you can like write notes to like your friends or like faculty, for 50 cents at lunches over like the week before Christmas break. And then we are donating all the proceeds to that to, I believe, a charity called Katie's Closet. And it, are you familiar with it?
Yeah, there's some cornerstone projects the kids are doing.
Yeah, so basically it provides like, I guess like clothing and other items to school districts in like poverty levels. And so like the students can like shop and like, I guess like purchase, but like not really buy the items. So we thought it was a pretty interesting charity to contribute to. And then we're also doing, everybody in our council brought in $3 to $5 on our meeting on Wednesday. And then we're going to go around to the Giving Trees and purchase items for the Giving Tree. Yeah, that's about it.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No? All right. Super. So do we have a motion to adjourn then? Because our next meeting is going to be January 12th, although we will try and schedule something before that for the open session. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, Leo. Second.
Second.
Second, Michelle Kirkley. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.